Okay, so let's quickly talk about early developmental milestones. Okay, so this is a bitch to memorize, so I made up some cool, funny mnemonics, some dirty, to make sure that we understand this. So there are three things this is broken down into: 1 year old, 3 years old, and 5 years old. 5 years old is not too important, but the 1 year old and the 3 year old milestones is really important. So the first thing you want to know is that when do the primitive reflexes disappear? So the primitive reflexes are the Moreau, Rooting, Palmer, and Babinski. So these are a few things that you need to know by heart, and they have a time frame associated with them. However, if you make them into a mnemonic, the way I think about it is that when I think of reflexes, I think of morning reflex, peanut butter, right? What do you think you do in the morning? What is a morning reflex? Well, for guys, it's when you wake up, you have a boner. It's just, it's shining and it's morning wood. That's what we call it. That's the morning reflex. Now, don't read too much into this, but basically when you have a morning reflex, what you want to do is take a jar of peanut butter and try to relieve yourself. So basically when you have this mnemonic, you're going to have morning reflex equal peanut butter. So the reflex part of it tells you that it's the primitive reflexes that are disappearing. So the morning reflex equal peanut butter, each letter starts with the same thing. So morning for Moreau reflex, reflex for Rooting reflex, P for Palmer, and B for Babinski. And if you know Babinski stops at 12 months of age, which is 1 year, you can just work your way backwards and understand that Palmer is 6, Rooting is 4, Moreau is 3. So you're good for that. Now, posture is pretty self-explanatory. You're walking by 1 year. You just need to know this, memorize this. Walking by 1 year makes sense. What do you do at 1 year? You walk. So before that, you need to stand. Before you stand, you need to be able to sit and roll. And before that, you need to be able to lift your head, which is at 1 month old. So that's pretty much done. So now the other one that I see quite a bit on NBMEs is the pincer grasp. And what is this? It's essentially holding some piece of paper or something in your palm that makes your muscles of your grasp really strong. So what I think about pincer grasp is Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob, the old greedy crab, the red dude. He's pincing a $10 bill because of course he's cheap. So with his pincers, he's a crab, he's pincing a $10 bill, so pincer reflex occurs at 10 months old, boom, you're done. So point to object is by 12 months old. How do you memorize this? Well, when I think of point, the pointing reflex, I think of, again, a boner pointing to 12. And what that means is if you think of a hourglass, not an hourglass, but a clock, the 12 is up here, the 6 is down here, so usually your dick points at a 6. However, when you're really aroused, it points at a 12. And that means points at a 12, so points at 12 months old. Now, the other thing you need to know that I feel is really important is when does object permanence occur? It occurs by 9 months. And what is object permanence? Essentially, if a child is playing with a toy and a person takes that toy away and puts it behind their back, the child's going to not know where it went. It's completely out of existence. Out of sight, out of mind is what the saying is for this. However, after 8 months, they're going to know it's behind your back and they're going to think you're an asshole. So basically, this object permanence is permanent in their mind, regardless if they see it or not. They know it's behind their back because they took it. So how to remember this? Well, I think if someone takes away my object, I know it exists. I know it exists because I have object permanence by 9 months. So I'm like, no, 9, it's mine, it exists. So essentially 999. Object permanence exists at 9 months old. Boom, done. So now moving on to this child toddler, there's not a lot to say here, but basically we know that it takes the first steps by 12 months, 1 year. So you're walking on your legs at 1 year. What do you do next? Of course, you're going to play soccer with those legs. Why else would you be walking on them? So you're going to be kicking a ball by 2 years. Makes sense, but you're going to be playing with that ball. So by 2 years, you're also doing parallel play. Okay, that makes sense. Now, the last thing that really shows up is core gender identity, which is formed at 36 months. So this is when girls are going to start getting flirty with boys, and boys are going to start hitting on girls at 3 years old. That's when I started. So when I think of this, I think of core gender, which is your sex role, right? You're determining if you're a boy or a girl. So I think of sex role, and that's herdy sex, right? Which is also herdy sex, 36 herdy sex. So 36 months is core gender identity formed. And that's basically it for this. Just to know that friends are also, cooperative play is by 4 years after parallel play ends at 3 years. And basically you're done. Just know all of this and you're pretty much good to go.